Thoughts on the Bible readings: 1 Samuel 26:27, Jeremiah 3, Matthew 4, for July 13th. In 1 Samuel 26 we learn of Saul continuing to seek David in order to slaughter him because of Saul's being consumed by jealousy, which, as Proverbs says, is as rotten bones. Proverbs 14 verse 30. But the fact remains that Yahweh continues to providentially preserve David. In the wilderness of Ziph Saul set up camp, and God causes a deep sleep to fall on Saul's entire camp. David and his nephew Abishai stealthily make their way into the camp and carry away Saul's spear and other personal and identifiable items as evidence that David has yet again spared his monarch's life. When Saul's army is at a safe distance, David calls after Saul and reprimands Abner for failing to protect his king. David shows genuine humility and requests how he might be reconciled to his master. Saul momentarily shows remorse for his actions and swore to leave David in peace. A young man is sent from Saul's host to retrieve the king's personal weaponry. In despair, David is certain that the truce with Saul is temporary, and so he determines to go to the land of the Philistines, believing that Saul will cease to pursue him. What a wrong, though understandable, decision. This desperate act would lead to a chain of lies and bloodshed that could have been avoided had David continued to trust in the Almighty, who had always proved to be his shield. In chapter 27, David and his men find themselves once again in the midst of Gath. How foolish it is for David to return to this Philistine city from which he has recently escaped, with his life being miraculously saved by his gracious God. Here he has to survive, this time, by his wits and his lies. This is clearly a low point spiritually in David's life, and yet again will it be miraculously spared by the Almighty. See chapters 29 and 30. David promises to serve Achish king of Gath and fight against his own people Israel in exchange for Achish providing a city as a base for David and his men to launch raids against his own nation. David is given the city of Ziklag. When David raids the nearby cities of Israel's enemies, he is forced to leave no one alive lest the Philistine king receives word about David's deception. He also lies to Achish about the location of his raids. The chapter concludes by telling us that through this David became one of Achish's trusted servants. How ironic that a servant of the Lord becomes trusted by dishonesty and a failure to value the ways of his sovereign. Let us ponder the lesson for us. In Jeremiah 3 verses 1-2 tell of the lewd behavior of Judah. In verses 3-5 we are told that God had withheld the blessings as a result of the nation's lascivious behavior. Verses 6-9 outline some of the horrific behaviors of Judah. Verses 10-13 are the Almighty's pleading with the nation to consider how they had wronged their sovereign and call upon them to turn to him wholeheartedly. If they do that, then their husband and Maker will restore their position to see Jerusalem as the capital city of Messiah's kingdom. Isaiah 2 verses 1-4, Zechariah 1 verse 9, 16, 20-21. Those blessings will see Jesus Messiah and his saints shepherding, i.e., feeding the nation with the nourishing and enriching word of the Lord. Yet despite such a glorious future, God's people were now behaving as a treacherous wife. Ezekiel 16 verses 22-58 tell us how Judah had failed to learn the lessons of how the Almighty had disciplined Samaria and Israel. In verses 21-25 the nation's omnipotent Creator pleads with his people to return to him in faithfulness. In chapter 14 verses 1-12 of Matthew, Herod is struck with terror on hearing of the miracles of Jesus. Herod Antipas, a convert of the Sadducees, and therefore a non-believer in the resurrection of the dead, was convinced that John the Baptist had been raised from the dead. Our Lord is told of John's brutal decapitation and in response seeks solitude to reflect. Verses 13-22 tell us that Jesus is interrupted by a multitude seeking him out, and his compassionate response to their need of a shepherd to teach them. Compare Numbers 27 verse 17. Jesus feeds 5,000 of them and heals many. John 6 tells us that their desire was to take him by force and make him their king. Jesus summarily dispersed the crowd and went into a mountain to pray. Verses 24-33 speak of Jesus sending the apostles by boat to the other side of the lake. After praying on the mountain, our Lord saw the apostles toiling and rowing on a storm-tossed sea and failing to make any progress. The Lord came to them through the storm, walking on the water. Peter alone showed the faith and courage to briefly do likewise. Though Peter's faith faltered, he alone had the courage to walk on the Sea of Galilee at the request of his Master. Oh, that such trust in our Master and such confidence was ours that Peter then displayed! Peter was rescued by his Master. Their port of destination was Capernaum, meaning the city of consolation. This speaks of our destination and finding comfort when our Lord, the Father's Son and our hope and consolation, has come. Verses 34 to 36 tell us that Jesus, on reaching the other side of the lake, Jesus healed many at Gennesaret.